السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أولا أود أن أرحب بزميلي وصديقي السيد لوران فابيوس وزير خارجية فرنسا، والذي قام بزيارة المملكة العربية السعودية اليوم، واجتمع بسيدي خادم الحرمين الشريفين، ثم زارنا في وزارة الخارجية ودار بيننا اجتماع بحثت خلاله العلاقات الثنائية وكيفية تعزيزها وتطويرها في كل المجالات. عبرنا عن امتناننا لاتجاه هذه العلاقات وما حققته من تقدم في المجالات السياسية والاقتصادية والأمنية والاجتماعية والتعليمية وغيرها من المجالات، عن طريق اللجنة المشتركة بين البلدين الذي يترأسها صاحب السمو الملكي ولي العهد من الجانب السعودي، ومعالي وزير الخارجية من الجانب الفرنسي. كما بحثنا الأوضاع في المنطقة الإقليمية، القضية الفلسطينية وأهمية إيجاد وسيلة لاستئناف عملية المفاوضات لإيجاد حل لهذا النزاع. بحثنا الأوضاع في سوريا وكيفية تطبيق مبادرات جنيف واحد وما تم الاتفاق عليه في اجتماعات فيينا واجتماعات نيويورك. وبحثنا موضوع المفاوضات الذي تعمل الأمم المتحدة على عقدها بين المعارضة والنظام. أيضا بحثنا الأوضاع في اليمن وآخر المستجدات هناك. بحثنا الموضوع الإرهاب بشكل عام، وأتيحت لي الفرصة أن أشرح لمعاليه التحالف الإسلامي لمواجهة الإرهاب والتطرف وكيفية وما توصلنا إليه في هذا المجال. كما بحثنا آخر المستجدات التي تتعلق بدور إيران السلبي في المنطقة وتدخلها في شؤون دول المنطقة. فأنا ما ودي أن أطول عليكم، وأود أن أعطي الكلمة لزميلي، ثم نكون على استعداد أن نتلقى الأسئلة منكم. Mr. Minister.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, chers collègues et amis, de votre accueil.
Thank you, my friend and my colleague, to this reception. I would like to greet the press here, and I came in the framework of the foreign relationship and the enduring relationship with France and Saudi Arabia. You well remember the visits, the bilateral visits that happened between the at the highest levels between the two countries, and I was honored to be received by His Majesty the Custodian of the two Holy Mosques when I arrived, and we have a work dinner. I will meet a number of Saudi ministers afternoon, and I will discuss with the Deputy Crown Prince all these topics afternoon. And as His Excellency the Minister has said, we have discussed a number of issues related to the regional policies and regional politics, and we talked about our political and economic relationships. And we have met we had a number of meetings about economic issues, and we were able to launch a number of joint economic projects. And we are going to have an extended meeting next March. And my visit today aims, among other things, to prepare for that meeting. And I think that we need to progress in this area. In addition to the economic issues, we have discussed the political situation in the region. So we are at a time of instability. France is a power that is working for peace and for stability and security in the region, and we want to do our best that this escalation, or to have this de-escalation, and to reduce the tension. And of course we talked about Syria, and we also discussed the issue of Libya. And I would like to express my gratitude, to express that we are happy to have the So the situation in Libya needs to have stability, and we must form a national unity government that is supported by all parties and factions
essentielle de l'État libyen puisse assurer en particulier pleinement sa sécurité et veiller
to have a functioning state including peace and security, and to limit the expansion of Daesh and ISIS in Libya. And we also talked about Syria, and we have the opportunity with our Saudi friends and other countries to tackle this issue with the Vienna meetings and in the framework of the Security Council. As you know, France is a permanent member of the Security Council, and we have exchanged opinions, and there is a close coordination between us, and we talked about the issue of Yemen, and we expressed that we are keen to implement the resolution 2016, and in general we talked about fighting terrorism, because this is a great problem and it is spreading around the world. And we talked about Iran, about the plight of terrorism, and we talked about Iran for the start of the implementation of June 2015, and second, since the Iranian president is going to visit France next week, as you know, and I repeat that we are keen for non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and we are keen also that every country should respect other countries in the region, and to exert efforts not only for feeding conflicts, but on the contrary, for having peace and security in this region as it happens across the world. And we spare no effort to achieve that, and I have also noticed, and this is not a surprise for you, that there are confident relationship between us, and I conveyed to the custodian of the Holy Mosque a message of friendship from the French president, and I expressed to the custodian of the Holy Mosques that we are keen to have this relationship. And this is from the side of the president and from the people of France. And we meet always with, I meet with my counterpart, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we are working together well. And I have noticed, once again, that how Saudi Arabia and the Minister of Foreign Affairs in particular have done everything possible in all these issues. And you have the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and this is a constant problem in Saudi Arabia and France do pay attention to that, and we thought about the appropriate ways to find a lasting peace for this conflict, and we might talk about it less in this time, but it is but it is still a grave problem, and you know what is the stance of France. There is no lasting peace without justice, and we should work to find a solution that realizes justice for the Palestinian people, and to secure and to guarantee the security of Israel. And we are here to answer your questions.
Merci. Ian Timberlake de l'agence France Presse.
Thank you.
Okay
from,
si je pose la question en français, d'accord. Okay,
can I ask in French?
OK. Merci. Il semble que les délégués pour les pourparlers syriens ne sont pas mis au point. Est-ce que vous, les deux ministres, est-ce que vous êtes d'accord si le groupe de l'opposition syrienne qui a rencontré ici à Riyad,
the question is directed to both ministers.
Modifier ou augmenter par exemple, par la groupe.
Can you change the formation of the composition of the team, of the opposition team? Minister Fabius, some days ago we met in Paris. The President and myself, we met Mr. Riyad Hijab. He is the head of what is called the Supreme Committee that was formed after the Riyadh conference. And I would like to congratulate Saudi Arabia for organizing this meeting and conference. And this was an expanded meeting. Extended meeting, and it included civilian and military opposition and armed opposition, and the moderates who wanted to have free Syria that have sovereignty with the guarantee of the territorial integrity of Syria and to have peace and security. And they have chosen Mr. Riyad Hijab as the coordinator for this Supreme Commission. So there is a negotiation that is going to be held, and it is preferable to have these negotiations, provided that it will lead to an outcome. We met in Vienna twice, and we met also in New York, and we have adopted a resolution at the Security Council, and we know that. And we now we should work to implement this resolution. Still, we have some questions. And the Special Envoy of the UN, Mr. de Mistura, went to the Security Council and raised this issue. And yesterday, I was in the United Arab Emirates. I met Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and we have discussed this issue. And still, we have some outstanding issues. And the first question is, who is going to sit around the table? We think that the Riyadh conference has brought together the different spectra of the Syrian opposition, and from the moderates, and the success of Riyadh conference should be honored, and the results should be respected and honored. Therefore, Mr. de Mistura should meet with the higher committee of Riyadh conference. On the other hand, if there are negotiations, the objective is to talk about the substance and the substance of that meeting. And the substance has been identified in the Geneva meetings, and the resolution 2254 this issue should be discussed in the negotiation. If the negotiation started and stopped after 3 days, as it happened in Geneva too, we are not going to have peace and the desired solution, and this is the things stand as such. So we should take all that into consideration. And a final remark: the bombing should stop and cease, and there are acts and actions that are not preconditions, but these are commitments proposed by the UN. There are cities and towns in which people are starving, and there is bombing on civilian population, and this, of course, contribute in the success of the negotiations. We must have these negotiations, but these should be organized in a manner that could achieve results.
أعتقد أن معي الوزير غطى الموضوع بشكل كامل، بس كنت حبيت أكد على نقطة واحدة، وهي أن المعارضة السورية هي اللي تحدد من يمثلها في المباحثات، واللجنة العليا المنبثقة من مؤتمر الرياض هي الجهة المعنية، وهم اللي يحددوا من يمثلهم في المفاوضات، ولا يجوز لأي أحد أي طرف آخر أن يفرض على المعارضة السورية من سيمثلهم في المباحثات مع بشار الأسد. غير كذا أنا أتفق مع ما قاله معالي الوزير.
خالد العمرين، قناة العربية. سؤال للمستر فابيوس. أنتم ذكرتم في تصريح في الإمارات بالأمس عن أن الاتحاد الأوروبي يدرس فرض عقوبات على الحكومة الإيرانية للتجارب البالستية. ما الذي قد يدفع الاتحاد الأوروبي أو الجانب الفرنسي إلى التراجع عن فرض مثل هذه العقوبات. السؤال الثاني، السوريون أو المفاوضة السورية بقيادة السيد رياض حجاب ذكر أن بقاء الأسد هو نقطة انطلاق المفاوضات. في تصريحات سابقة لكم في الصحافة الفرنسية ذكرتم أنكم لستم متمسكين، وهناك دارت شكوك حول رأي الفرنسيين من بقاء الأسد أثناء العملية الانتقالية. أخيرا وفي نفس السياق، الجانب الروسي الآن دخل على الموضوع وهم يعني يقومون بقصف لبعض المدن السورية. المفاوضات أو قرارات جنيف 1 و 2 تنص على وقف القصف. الجانب الروسي الآن هو طرف في هذه المفاوضات، فمن ستتفاوضون معه لوقف القصف، مع الجانب الروسي أم مع الجانب السوري، النظام السوري؟
Alors, il y a deux questions différentes. Il y a une question qui concerne l'Iran.
And these are two different questions, a question related to Iran and a question related to Syria. Regarding Syria, the position of France is a firm position, and we wish that Syria have a free Syria and also the territorial integrity of Syria,
sa confession puisse vivre en coexistence.
In which all the Syrians could live irrespective of their religion and their convictions. And you know what happened in Syria. Out of the revolution from some of the Syrian youth, the things have been dealt with by Bashar al-Assad in a manner that led to have more than 250,000 people being killed in Syria, and millions of Syrians were forced to flee their homes, and they went to other areas into Syria or to other countries, and the situation is catastrophic and disastrous. If we wanted to achieve the desired objective, we should have a political solution, and from here comes the importance of the Vienna meeting and the negotiation process. And of course, we must stop the bombing. Who is bombing there? The civilians. Sometimes Daesh or ISIS is bombing the civilians, and we are targeting Daesh and ISIS. And we in the coalition, and we participate in these operations, and the Russians have entered, and you know the interference there, but we tell the Russians, and we have told them earlier that their intervention should target Daesh and ISIS, and not the moderate opposition, Syrian opposition. And when we have a result of the bombing, and nobody is doubting that, and because there is information available, and there is some Syrian bombing against Daesh, sometimes, but there are a lot of bombing operations against the civilians and the moderate operation. This is the contrary to what should happen. Regarding Iran, you know that the 14th of June there was an agreement that has been signed, and all the negotiating process. France has adopted a position that the President and I described it as a firm and constructive stance. And what does that mean? And we wished, as every wise person, to have an agreement for avoiding standoff, but on a firm position, on a serious position. The objective was to prevent the proliferation of nuclear arms. If we have in that agreement, the other countries would have said this is not a serious agreement, and why we shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. And so we have worked in this process, and there is a period for the agreement to the implementation day. And the IAEA was the watchdog for that, and it has given the green light. And there is another question related to another issue that has not been covered in the nuclear deal with Iran, which is related to the missiles. And of course,
que soit respecté l'accord nucléaire, il faut aussi
we
que le même
must be vigilant to make sure that this agreement is honored and to stay vigilant for everything Iran does. And recently we have denounced the efforts of Iran and its testing of missiles, and this is something not allowed. The sanctions that are related to the ballistic missiles have nothing to do with the nuclear agreement. The Americans have announced that they have taken additional measures, and for Europe, because your question was related to Europe, the recent meeting of the Council of the European Union that was convened on Monday has decided to reconsider, from a technical point of view, the European regimen that is applied for the test of ballistic missiles. There is a European regimen regarding that. What does that mean? We should study what are the sanctions that we could impose and what our relationship with the American sanctions. And as I have said, this is a technical aspect, but if there are things that are prohibited based on the UN resolution, they should be sanctions could be imposed against Iran as a result of that.